Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop, and this week we're going to be making a zero clearance insert for my table saw. Roll the intro. Okay, so fellow woodworkers, this week's project is something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and when I recently made some alterations to the chicken coop, and there's a series on my channel, I'll put a link to it here if you've not seen it. When I made the alterations to the chicken coop, I used the table saw quite a lot more than I normally would, and I was doing some more intricate or more precise cuts, and one of the things that I noticed was the gap that's here between the blade and the edge of the insert is actually quite big, and it took a while to clear all of the stuff out of the inside of the table saw where it had obviously gone down. And the other thing was, I had this scarred off a few times when I was cleaning it out, and it made me realize how flimsy this guard is. It's not like, this is not an expensive table saw where you might have, you know, a centimetre or a half an inch thick plate that goes in the top. This is a very flimsy piece of plastic, really, and you can see just how much bend and flex there is in it. So I know there's a lot of videos on YouTube about making a sort of zero clearance inset, but it is actually something now which I think that this table saw would really benefit from. I actually want to make two of these. I'm only going to make one this week, and if it works, and hopefully it will, I'll then go on to make another one, because I want to make one for my thicker blade, and the one that I'm going to make today is just for my normal bog standard blade. Now, I'm going to use two different types of wood. The one that I'm going to make on this week's episode of the Garage Workshop, I'm just going to use out of a piece of MDF that I've got lying around. The other piece, I've got a slightly thicker piece of wood that I took from an IKEA unit. So the first thing is to go and find a piece of wood that is roughly the same dimension as this. Let's go and do that now. As you can see, I still had plenty of wood to choose from, and eventually I settled on a piece of MDF and a piece of hardwood from an old IKEA unit that I used to have. Okay, so I found two pieces of wood which I think are going to be good enough for the job. The first one is this, and this is, it's just sort of MDF covered in, I don't want to say vinyl, but it's from that well-known coffee manufacturer brand that I got out of the skip, and it's just covered, but it's not. It's a nice piece of wood, and it's just the right size. In fact, just a little bit over what I need. The second piece of wood is this, which is from a recycled IKEA butcher block. I don't know what type of wood it is that IKEA use. I mean, this is really, really substantial hardwood. If you know what it is, just put it in the comments. Obviously, it's not one piece of wood. You can see it's made up and glued up of lots and lots of different pieces. This one, I'm a bit worried about whether I can cut it, because I know when I cut the end off of this, it took a lot for the mitre saw to get through it, so not too sure about that one, so I might leave that one. But this is the one that I'm going to focus on. Now, obviously, this piece of wood is a lot thicker than this piece of wood. So the plan of action is to cut around this first, get this to roughly the right shape where it will fit inside here, and then I can take the edges off. But then what I'll need to do is route out the sides to fit in with the edge that's on here. So I'm just going to take a measurement. From videos I've looked at online, apparently this gap here is 4 mil deep. So I'll use my digital measurer to measure that and see if it is 4 mil, and if it is, then I know how much I need to take out around the edge. So first plan of action is to draw this shape onto this, get it cut down, get it to the right size so it matches this. Now at some point I'm going to have to take the blade and the riving knife out to get this to work, but let's do that now. I really took my time drawing around the shape, because it was really important that I got a super accurate shape. I butted a piece of wood up to make sure it was exactly on the edge. Once I got the template, I took it to the mitre saw and I just began to trim off the edges as close as I could, and then I put it in long ways, and luckily my blade was just about long enough to take it out. Next thing was just to take it to my sander and just rough off the edges. And again, really took my time here because I wanted this to be really neat and precise to the lines, because obviously when I drop it in to the table saw, I want it to fit perfectly, and you can always, you know, take more away, you can never add more. When I'd done that, I then had to take out my table saw blade, which luckily I've done quite a few times now, and it popped out, and then I tried the shaped piece of wood, and I was so relieved to find that it actually fitted the correct size. The next thing I did was carefully measured the width to make sure I had the right measurements. I was really keen to get this right and not many mistakes, so I just got a piece of scrap wood which was fairly hard and just ran it through the router just to make sure it was going to be the right height and wasn't going to be any issues. So when I was confident, I started to run the wood through, and at this point the router tip dropped. I don't know why, so I just readjusted it, but this time I adjusted it to the height it was at the beginning to make sure it was the right size. And then I ran it through, and then I just repeated the process on the other long side. I know this was only MDF, but it went through really nicely. I was surprised actually I didn't get more resistance, but as you can see from this non-speeded up piece of film, I did take it really slow, because with something like this you don't want to spend your whole time doing it again and again and again, because you've just rushed it basically. So I really took my time and got a nice quality cut all the way along the length of the piece of wood. When both sides were finished, I really did think long and hard about how I was going to do this next step. I thought perhaps I could do it a number of ways, but in the end I settled for using this contraption, which the name has completely escaped me. It's a bit like a sort of sliding table, really. Somebody in the comments tell me what it's called, I can never remember. Anyway, I decided that was going to be the best method, so I measured it up and I put the router on, and I just started running it back and forward, and it took the material off really well. Just while I'm on this point, you'll have seen in the screen there all the way through. I know you haven't seen my face, I have been wearing my protection, my breathing apparatus, because you've got to be so careful with MDF, and I know if you use MDF you'll all be aware of that, but you've just got to be so careful using it, because obviously the tiny particles of dust can get in your throat and everywhere. So I was wearing my respirator and I kept it on the whole way through. It was really important in a project like this. And of course when I'd done one side, it was just a simple case of turning it over, lining up and doing the second one. And I did here, just had a look at the gap I needed at both ends, and one end I needed slightly more cut out than the other, so I just figured that in when I was doing the second side. So the next stage was to mark off the points where the two pins will sit, which will keep the insert held down on both ends. So in one there's a sort of turn screw which slides a piece of metal across, a bit like a sort of pinball wizard puck, and on the other side there are just two sort of slots that go in underneath. So the easiest way to do them was to just line it up and then mark it on both ends, which is what I did. When I'd finished marking up, I actually had a little mini stroke of genius, which is not often for me. So I set up this stock block, as you can see, using that split of wood. And then what I did was I just gradually ran it back and forward, just taking out a bit more material each time. You can see the groove that I'm cutting in there. And that's the groove that will have the sort of sliding piece of metal, which will lock the insert into place. When I thought about doing this, I thought, oh, how am I going to do it? And I thought, actually, I can just literally nibble a bit off each time. So I was quite pleased with my endeavour there. And I thought, oh, that's quite clever of me. But it took a few goes to get it neat, but I was happy with it in the end. So with that done, I was able to drill. I just put a little marking pencil roughly where I thought it was, and I drilled above a drilling block, which I've really noticed has massively helped me not get so much tear out. So I just literally put a hole in to where I thought it broke the surface, and then I went the other side and just hollowed out the hole, like pre-drilled it. But I've got a new piece of kit for doing that, and it left a funny shaped hole. I think it's more me getting used to using it, but there's the hole you can see, and then I just expanded it for the screw head to sink into. I'm not exactly sure what I did wrong here. I mean, they say bad work, but workmen blames their tools. And to be honest, I was using a screwdriver, electric screwdriver, rather than a drill, but it just didn't make a very neat hole. I think it's just me, but I was happy with how it looked in the end, and it was the most important thing. It was the right depth. With that done, it was a case of attaching the furniture, as I refer to it. Please excuse my great big sausage hands all in the way in this frame, but what I was doing, you need to get this whole unit to work sort of simultaneously. So the best way to get it to work simultaneously is of course to glue it. So I got the super glue out, you can see my knuckles there. I got the super glue out and I put some super glue on, and the whole point of it is it keeps the unit together. So when you turn the screw from the top, obviously it turns the bar and makes the bar come out or swing out. It took a couple of goes, I'm not going to lie, to get this exactly how I wanted it to be, but when I had and I'd given the glue time to dry, then it worked exactly as I wanted it to be. The other difficulty was it was incredibly fiddly to try and do it up. So this piece of footage, it's real. This channel's all about real footage, but blimey, I felt like I'd had a fight with it by the time I eventually got it settled into place, but it did. And then, as I said, the key thing was to let the glue dry. I then set on the second bit and glued the 2 pins at the end, which I'm pleased to say was a lot less difficult than the first end. Okay, so the next stage was just to check that it fit, and it did. I just want to be very clear about this next piece of footage because I want to be absolutely sure and certain with you this was not unsafe in any way. What I wanted to do was get a marker for the blade so that I knew exactly where the blade was going to sit, because obviously with it reconstructed the blade sits above and you can't do it in the traditional manner. So I got the table saw on, I switched it off, and then as it was slowing down, I just gently eased, very gently eased the insert plate on the top, and what that did was, you can't see it there, bad camera angle, but it basically gave me a line that I knew the blade was going to sit on. So the next stage was to set the router up in exactly the right place where the blade had sat, and then I just ran it through 2 or 3 times back and forward to get to the right depth. And what it did was essentially it sort of created a track in the underside. You can see me there just testing it to see if it fits, but it created a track in the underside which let me get ready for the blade. With the insert now tightened in and ready to go, I was able to raise the blade up, and much to my delight it popped through perfectly with no issues at all. I was able to raise the blade up fairly quickly and it made a really nice, clean, smooth cut, which I was really pleased about. Having had one side work successfully, obviously I flipped it over. Now, if you do this and you make an insert the same way as me, you need to be very careful with how you do this. You must remember to flick this upside down and then try it again, because if you don't, of course, you're not going to have enough room in the length of the slot for the riving knife. So this is why I had to do it upside down. So obviously it cuts one side more than the other. So raising it and flipping it over and doing this allowed the cut to almost go right to the very edge, but it also meant there was more than enough room for the riving knife when I flipped it back up the right way. Hello fellow woodworkers, so here it is, it's finished at last, my zero clearance insert for my Evolution Rage 5S table saw. I'm really pleased with how it's worked out. It's exactly as I wanted it to be, it's exactly as I hoped it would be, and as you saw at the end there, it works perfectly. So really well worth the effort. Quite a lot involved in it, I know, but it's something I'll use again and again, and actually now I've seen how strong it is, I don't think I'll make a second one. I don't think I need to be honest. So really pleased with how it turned out. Again, quite straightforward thing to make. Took a bit of a while, I know, but really nice straightforward thing to make, and I think it's going to last me a good long time. So I'm going to leave this one in my table saw now, because I think I'm going to get a much better quality of cut. If this is your first time at the Garage Workshop, thank you so much for working. We've just passed 500 subscribers, which is amazing. I never thought we'd get that many, so thank you so much for your support. If it is your first time here, please subscribe, like and comment. If you are a regular viewer, thank you so much for all your continued support. I'll see you on the next episode of the Garage Worktop. Take care, fellow woodworkers.